This is the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Claire McDonnell, and at 1300 hours GMT on Thursday, the 1st of August, these are our main stories. Rwanda closes its border with the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's feared an outbreak of Ebola there might spread. Democratic Party contenders in the US presidential race take part in the latest TV debate. And Houthi rebels in Yemen say they carried out an attack on a military parade near Aden, which killed at least 30 people. Also in this podcast, 6 months after a deadly attack in Nairobi in which 21 people died at a hotel, it opens its doors again. And why Woodstock 50 has been cancelled just 2 weeks before it was due to start.
Jay-Z pulled out, and then, Miley Cyrus pulled out yesterday. You had all of the original Woodstock artists pulling out. It wasn't clear that there was going to be anyone left to actually entertain fans who might show up.
But first, a few hours ago, it was confirmed that the border between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo near the city of Goma has been closed following 2 confirmed deaths from Ebola. It's a year since the original outbreak. So far, at least 1,800 people have died. The border has been shut owing to fears that the outbreak could spread quickly to Rwanda. We'll hear from our correspondent in the city of Goma shortly, but first, our Africa correspondent Anne Soy reports from Beni Center, the epicentre of the outbreak.
There has been a confirmed case of Ebola here, and therefore it's very important to decontaminate the room he'd been in. They're now spraying the staircase leading into the room, the door frame, inside the room, the bed. I can see one of the health workers has removed 2 mattresses from the room. He's taking them to the far corner within the clinic. The beddings are burned. A short distance from the clinic, we've come to a home where we're told a person died of Ebola, and there's a funeral going on. Tension is high. I can see people gathered in small groups talking, and we've been advised to leave. They say that the people here could attack us anytime. And so off we go. Many people here in eastern Congo still do not believe that Ebola exists. There are myths and conspiracies going on within the community. Health facilities, including Ebola treatment centers, have been attacked throughout this outbreak. But all is not lost. Every so often, they celebrate the recovery of some patients.
I contracted Ebola while taking care of my husband. He died and I refused to come for treatment at first. But by God's grace, I'm now well. I received good care. We had heard that people get injected in the neck and die, but I haven't seen that. It's a lie.
Back in the village, there are many rumors. They say people die when they come here. But now I have seen that is not true.
As these survivors return to the village, they take with them an indisputable message that it's possible to beat Ebola.
And Soy in Beni Center. Well, our correspondent Gaius Kowene is in Goma.
Goma is actually this big city with many people traveling a lot, and Ebola reaching here is something that is worrying not only residents of the town of Goma, but also people across the region. And that's, for example, one of the reasons why Rwanda closed its border. That happened especially after a 3rd person was confirmed to have Ebola in Goma. And Rwandans, I think, they are afraid that it may spread to their country.
Goma is a very big city, as you've already said, 2 million people. Are health workers there able to cope? Do you have the infrastructure there to cope?
Well, the Congolese health system itself is a little fragile, is not well equipped. However, when the Ebola outbreak was declared a year ago, partners of the Ministry of Health started reinforcing the Congolese health workers, especially when it comes to training and equipment. And now in Goma, there is a newly built Ebola treatment center, and that's where the 2 recent deaths happened. And most of them died because they went to seek treatment very late.
And this could be to do with scepticism. We were just hearing in Anne Soy's report there that there is some scepticism that the disease even exists, and there have been attacks on health workers treating Ebola. So what are the authorities trying to do to tackle both of those issues?
When we talk normally about, here they call it community resistance, there is this lack of trust between locals and the response team. And this has nothing to do with Ebola, because this is a region where people among themselves, they don't really trust each other that well, because there have been many cases where people have been poisoned. They are suspicious of each other. So anyone who comes from outside, it's totally normal for them to be suspicious as well, which is the case now with the Ebola response team. Then we also had silence of some local leaders and confusion that was spread by some politicians who started spreading conspiracy theories about Ebola, saying that it was created for political reasons and all this. However, that is starting to change slowly. Now that more people are coming out of Ebola treatment centers, we've seen, for example, since the outbreak was declared a year ago, more than 700 people have been healed, especially those who went to seek treatment on time. And these people who were healed are the ones now going back to the community, trying to convince members of the community that actually Ebola is real and one can get healed if they seek treatment on time.
Gaius Kawene there in Goma. Now, let's turn to Yemen. What you're hearing is the sound of chaos and confusion at a military camp near the city of Aden, shortly after an attack by Houthi rebels, which has killed a large number of people. Yemen has been embroiled for years in a civil war that's seen government forces, aided by Saudi Arabia, fighting the Houthis, who are backed by Iran. I asked our Arab Affairs editor, Alan Johnston, what we know about the attack.
The target of this camp lies in the barren hills just outside Aden, and photographs show that a parade had got underway and started exactly as it would have been planned. Smartly dressed soldiers marching past a reviewing stand where senior officers would have been looking on. We understand that a band was just about to play, but then everything changed very suddenly. A missile attack, a witness saying that there was a large explosion just behind the reviewing stand, and then video footage shows us scenes of total terrible chaos. There are dead soldiers lying on the ground, large pools of blood, survivors milling around, crying out. They try to take in the horror around them. Some soldiers are frantically trying to help the wounded, get them into pickup trucks and race them off for medical attention. Others peer into a crater which must have been left by the missile, and others, we're told, wept over the body of what we believe was a very senior commander. The Houthi rebels who launched this attack say the parade was part of preparations by a Saudi-backed pro-government alliance, a fresh offensive on Houthi-held territory that lies to the north of Aden.
There was also another attack, wasn't there, in the city of Aden as well?
That's right. Just before this attack on the parade, a police station in Aden was targeted by a suicide bomber. We know less about this, but we understand that some officers were killed. Some reports saying that around 3, others suggesting many more than that died, and that there were a number of wounded. Nobody yet claiming responsibility for this, but there have been attacks in Aden in the past carrying out by jihadis loyal to either Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State group. As I say, though, as yet we're not clear who was behind that attack in Aden.
Alan Johnston. The race is well underway within the US Democratic Party to select a challenger to take on Donald Trump in next year's presidential election. It is a crowded field with more than 20 contenders. 10 debated on Tuesday night on the television and another 10 on Wednesday. And they included the former Vice President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher watched the debate in Detroit.
Please welcome from Delaware, former Vice President Joe Biden.
Joe Biden knew that he needed to shine, or at least correct course. His clash with Senator Kamala Harris at the last debate had given her momentum, but checked his. This time they started out friendly enough.
Go easy on me, kid.
How you doing?
Good.
You good? As expected, though, the two went after each other again on health care, an issue that has split the Democratic Party. Ms. Harris had just unveiled a new plan. Mr. Biden mocked her claim that it wouldn't require more taxes on the middle class or eliminate private insurance.
So this idea is a bunch of malarkey, what we're talking about here. The fact of the matter is that there will be a deductible. It will be a deductible on their paycheck. Bernie acknowledges it. For $30 trillion has to ultimately be paid. And I don't know what math you do in New York. I don't know what math you do in California, but I tell you, that's a lot of money. And there will be a deductible. The deductible will be out of your paycheck because that's what will be required.
Senator Harris, I want to bring you in here. Your response?
Yeah, let's talk about math. Let's talk about math. You do nothing to hold the insurance companies to task for what they have been doing to American families.
Other candidates were also eager to land blows on the front runner. Senator Cory Booker took him to task for having supported crime bills that resulted in the mass incarceration of black men. And he brushed aside Mr. Biden's attempts to criticize his own handling of the police when he was a mayor in New Jersey.
There's a saying in my community, you're dipping into the Kool-Aid and you don't even know the flavor. You need to come to the city of Newark and see the reforms that we put in place. You are trying to shift the view from what you created. There are people right now in prison for life for drug offenses because you stood up and used that tough on crime, phony rhetoric that got a lot of people elected, but destroyed communities like mine. This isn't about the past, sir. This is about the present.
On immigration, the New York mayor, Bill de Blasio, demanded to know whether Joe Biden had supported Barack Obama's deportation of migrants and kept pushing when the former vice president evaded the question.
He went right around the question. Mr. Vice President, you want to be president of the United States. You need to be able to answer the tough questions. I guarantee you, if you're debating Donald Trump, he's not going to let you off the hook. So did you say those deportations were a good idea? Or did you go to the president and say, this is a mistake, we shouldn't do it? Which one?
I was vice president. I am not the president. I keep my recommendation in private.
Mr. Vice President, you can't have it both ways. You invoke President Obama more than anybody in this campaign. You can't do it when it's convenient and then dodge it when it's not.
Mr. Biden tried to place the controversial parts of his history in the context of different times to show that he knew the party had changed and he could change with it. But his ultimate defense was indeed the judgment of the man who had made him vice president.
Here's the deal. The fact is that we're talking about things that occurred a long, long time ago. And now all of a sudden, you know, I find it fascinating. Everybody's talking about how terrible I am on these issues. Barack Obama knew exactly who I was. He had 10 lawyers do a background check on everything about me on civil rights and civil liberties, and he chose me, and he said it was the best decision he made.
After the debate, there is still the question of whether enough Democratic voters will trust Mr. Biden. There were times when he faltered on stage, but by and large, he capably defended his record. It was perhaps not a standout performance, but probably good enough to reassure his supporters for now.
Barbara played Usher at that Democratic TV debate in Detroit. Protesters in Hong Kong who have been calling for greater autonomy from China are poised to start their 9th week of mass demonstrations. But the Chinese army unit stationed in Hong Kong has just released a promotional video showing off their arsenal and their anti-riot tactics. Our Asia-Pacific editor, Celia Hatton, has seen the video and she told me about it.
It's quite a dramatic video. It looks like scenes from a movie, a Hollywood movie, really. It shows troops who appear at times to be training for combat. They're shown uncoiling barbed wire. At other times, they appear to be in active combat. They're firing off explosives. They're using their guns, bursting into rooms, and using guns to aim and shoot bullets. So it's very dramatic footage. It's definitely designed to get attention.
Absolutely. I'm looking at it now. It looks, as you say, it looks like something from a Hollywood movie. What's the purpose of this?
I think the purpose is to ruffle feathers, to frighten protesters in Hong Kong, quite frankly, into deciding to stop their protests and stay home. I think we have to be careful, though, that this is video that comes from the Chinese People's Liberation Army, part of their propaganda wing. It is not directly from the Chinese central government. In fact, I went to a Chinese Foreign Ministry press conference and asked about this video. And the response was, well, if you want to ask the military, ask them for their interpretation of this video. So it was really kind of put at arm's length a little bit. But that said, it is from the Chinese military. It is obviously a lot of production went into this video. So I think basically the Chinese government is sort of trying to speak out of both sides of its mouth. On one side, it doesn't want to acknowledge these ongoing concerns that it will eventually use military force to stop protests in Hong Kong. On the other hand, it is fine to worry people and to kind of drop these heavy hints that it's armed and ready, and it's refusing to directly answer concerns that it would use military force. It's been asked twice directly in the past week if force would be used, and both times it said, just look up the relevant law, which when you look it up says, yes, the military can go into Hong Kong, can use force in Hong Kong in times of natural disaster or social unrest.
Celia Hatton talking to me from Beijing. Still to come on this podcast, a burqa ban in the Netherlands, but can it be enforced? To Kenya now, where a major hotel in Nairobi is reopening today, 7 months after 21 people were killed there in a terror attack. The hotel lost 6 of its staff, and in the wake of the attack, blamed on al-Shabaab militants, it has tightened security, with armed police now guarding the hotel. The reopening comes as the government introduces sweeping changes in the security sector, including plans to arm security guards. Our correspondent Emmanuel Gunza reports.
It's an explosion. It's lots of gunshots now. Run down! Run when you no!
January 15, 2019. Heavily armed gunmen storm a luxury hotel and office complex in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, throwing bombs at cars and shooting indiscriminately. By the time the siege is ending 16 hours later, 21 people have been killed and many more injured. But months later, the sounds here are very different. There's been a lot of celebration ahead of the reopening of the hotel. The flag of the hotel has been taken around 6 countries to commemorate the 6 people who died. The hotel itself looks new. All the visible signs of bullet holes that once dotted the walls have been covered. An additional security barrier has been erected at the main gate. The hotel's general manager, Michael Metaxis, says they are ready for business.
The family spirit is grown even stronger than ever before. And this is why everybody is so excited when we're going to reopen the hotel.
But for some families of the victims, life has completely changed.
Especially for my daughter, who really understands.
Diana Otieno's husband, James Oduor, fondly called Odukobra by many of his friends, died that day. An ardent football fan, he worked in an electronic shop at the complex and tweeted about hearing gunshot sounds and explosions as the gunmen stormed the hotel. She tells me the family has struggled to come to terms with this death.
His absence has been the most difficult. I knew that he's leaving for work and coming in the evening, then one day he doesn't come back. It's been just difficult all around, mentally, physically, it's just been hard. You find kids, my children asking me, where's daddy, is daddy coming back? I don't know. I can't even explain. I kept thinking that they're kids and they'll forget.
Like other families, Diana wants the government to do much more to improve the security in the country and prevent such attacks from happening again. They have formed a lobby group to push the state to address the security gaps. On the outskirts of the city, guards from a private security firm are graduating after 2 weeks of intense training. In the past, private security guards were not allowed to be armed. Now the government wants that to change, and for these guards to work alongside police officers. Lucas Ndolo is the chief operating officer of a leading private security firm in the country.
We have very many policemen who guard VIPs. We have policemen who guard banks. Just the very fact that you can have private security doing this means that we'll be able to remove these police officers from these duties and allow them to secure you and I, to make sure that you and I, are able to go about our businesses and our lives as securely as possible.
The government hopes that the increase of budgetary allocation for the security sector and these latest changes will lead to a much better ratio of policemen for every civilian. But the arming of guards has not satisfied everyone, with some saying that arming security guards is a greater security risk given that many are not properly trained to handle weapons. Lucas Ndolo disagrees.
We are not going to get the normal security officer that we have had working in an office block and give him a weapon. No, we will have had to have trained perhaps a retired police officer.
The Riverside complex attack in Nairobi joined a growing list of attacks carried out by militants on Kenyan soil. The government hopes that much empowered and trained security guards like these ones graduating today could act as a deterrent for such attacks happening again.
Emmanuel Egunza there in Nairobi. A ban on face-covering garments, including Islamic veils such as the burqa and niqab, is being introduced in the Netherlands today. The new rule, which also outlaws ski masks and crash helmets, applies to public buildings and public transport, but not out on the streets. People caught breaking the new law could face a fine. But as Anna Holligan reports, the new legislation has already hit problems.
The ban, which was seen as symbolic from the start, appears to be unravelling already, with police, hospitals and public transport staff refusing to enforce the new rules after officers said they wouldn't treat any violation on trains, buses or trams as a high priority offence. Only a few hundred women in the Netherlands actually wear the full face veil. The law was agreed at a time of political tensions, partly linked to the refugee crisis. Some nationalist politicians claimed the garment was evidence of a culture clash, proof that Islam was at odds with Dutch values of openness and freedom. Agreeing to a burqa ban was seen as a token attempt by the Dutch government to see off a challenge from the populist right wing. The mayor of Amsterdam, Femke Halsema, described the law as not fitting our multi-ethnic communities.
Anna Holligan reporting. Finally, the original Woodstock Music Festival in upstate New York promised free love, world peace and plenty of rock and roll.
500,000 young people can get together and have 3 days of fun and music and have nothing but fun and music. And I God bless you for it.
The organisers were hoping to reprise the magic of 1969 at Woodstock 50, the event to celebrate half a century since the original show. But alas, no, this year's event has been cancelled just 2 weeks before it was due to start. So what's going on? A question for our reporter, David Lewis.
It really is the day the music died. Well, Woodstock 50 initially had an eye-catching lineup with Jay-Z, The Killers and the Black Keys all booked in, but near enough from the outset it's been plagued by financial difficulties, big-name cancellations, a court battle and a venue change. I mean, this summer's three-day festival was announced in January and it was organised by Michael Lang, who co-produced the original 1969 show, but by March, rumours were circling about money problems. Undeterred, organisers released their lineup and said tickets would go on sale that April. But a week later, the chief funder broke ranks and announced the festival had been called off. It couldn't guarantee the health and safety of those attending. He said organisers ploughed on. They took those backers to court and found new investors. Then organisers announced the event was moving from New York to Maryland instead, but the sheen was coming off. Music giants, including Jay-Z and Santana, dropped out, maybe in a last-ditch attempt. Festival chief said the event would be free, but have now finally chucked in the towel. They've officially said it's all over. In an interview, Bill Wordie, a music industry expert, said he wasn't surprised by the announcement.
Jay-Z pulled out, and then, Miley Cyrus pulled out yesterday. You had all of the original Woodstock artists pulling out. It wasn't clear that there was going to be anyone left to actually entertain fans who might show up. For most people in the industry, this is a fait accompli. This is something that we knew was coming, and It was just a matter of time. I think once they lost their permits in New York, it was really time to give it up. And for whatever reason, they felt that they could make it happen. And now it's very clear that was not the right judgment.
Seems such a shame, doesn't it? What was it about the original Woodstock then that has endured for so long?
It's not an overstatement to say that the original Woodstock in August 1969 was really a pivotal moment in the counterculture generation. It was billed as 3 days of peace and music, and it was held at Max Yazga's farm in upstate New York. Max Yazga was the chap we heard alongside Jimi Hendrix earlier on in this sequence. More than 400,000 teenagers and hippies, music lovers, descended from all over America to tune in and drop out watching artists like Grateful Dead, The Who, Ravi Shankar and Janis Joplin. It ended up raining incessantly, and there were nowhere near enough toilet facilities, but it became the blueprint for the enormous future music festivals that we now know.
David Lewis there on why Woodstock 50 is no more. And that is all from us for now. There will be an updated version of this Global News podcast later. If you want to comment on this podcast or the topics covered in it, then you can. Just send us an email. The address is globalpodcast@bbc.co.uk. Hannah Griffith did just that. She heard the news that the next 18 months are crucial in the fight against climate change. And so she asked this: what normal people like herself can do to tip the balance? Let us know what ideas you have on the matter. globalpodcast@bbc.co.uk. I, for one, have stopped using shower gel in plastic bottles and moved on to good old-fashioned soap. I have cut down my plastic intake just a little bit, but Hannah, that's what I've done. Let us know what you are doing. We love to hear from you on the Global News podcast. I'm Claire McDonnell, and until next time, goodbye.